Sustained Silent Reading and Read Alouds by Keith-M. So, what do 14% of American adults, 19% of high school graduates, 70% of prison inmates, and 32 million United States adults have in common? According to the website, the Statistic Brain, which gathers data from the Department of Education, they can't read. So, furthermore, there's a number 43, and the significance of this number is that 29% of adults read at a basic level, 14% read at a below basic level, and that means 43% of Americans are just getting by or not getting by at all when it comes to reading. This is a percentage of our fellow Americans that is way too big to ignore. This is a very serious problem. That's why I'm going to talk about the sources of these problems, how to combat it with 2 simple techniques, and address some of the concerns people have in implementing these techniques. So the problem with adult illiteracy starts at the roots, with childhood. Habits are formed early. According to Jim Traley's, the National Endowment for the Arts did a survey where they studied adults for 25 years, and with their most recent published results matched perfectly with findings by the National Assessment of Educational Progress in regards to the reading habits of 13 and 17-year-olds. This means that the reading habits one has in adult life are established early and maintained early. That's why you have to get to a child early and establish better reading habits. So, aren't people already getting to these children early? Well, yes, but they're not doing so well. For example, schools, they're constantly updating their curriculums to try and teach children how to read. However, in a 37-year span, 17-year-olds only saw a 1-point improvement in reading scores, and 13-year-olds only saw a 5-point. That's a 1 to 5 point improvement in a 37-year span. That's not good results. They're trying their best, but they simply don't have the time or the ability to get these kids interested in reading. And it's a lot to do about the way we teach children, because we assign them a bunch of stuff they don't want to read, and then they become disinterested in reading, because human beings are pleasure-oriented. And when you find something displeasurable, you don't do it. So what is normally done to teach children literacy doesn't work, and we can see this in a study conducted by Warwick Kelly, which did a comprehensive study of 32 countries across the world. For this study for the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement, among the 32 countries involved, the United States was ranked 2nd for 9-year-olds. However, for 14-year-olds, we fell to the 8th place. We lost 6 points, or 6 places, in 5 years. This is because reading is an accrual skill. That means you get better at it over time. And students simply aren't doing enough reading to maintain their position in these rankings. So we need to find ways to get Americans reading again. And one simple way to do this is with reading aloud to children and sustained silent reading. These are 2 simple techniques that Ellie found cause students to be able to read better. So reading aloud. There was a study, according to Jim Traley's, which found that repeated reading of picture books at least 3 times, God bless you, during the, even when a child is in primary grades, causes a 15 to 20% increase in vocabulary acquisition. Now this is important because vocabulary is the #1 indicator of how a child is going to do when they enter school. This makes sense because if a child can't understand what a teacher is saying, they won't learn the material that the teacher is presenting. So this is also important because children mimic the behavior of parents. You've all heard the term, children are a blank slate, children are sponges, and this is true. We imitate the behavior we see our parents do. So if we see that our parents don't value reading, we ourselves aren't going to value reading. And more importantly, reading helps children learn grammar. If this makes a lot of sense because books have correct grammar in them. And the more you read to a child, the more that they will hear and recognize these speech patterns and present them themselves. So sustained silent reading. 45% of you who took the survey said that you didn't know what this term was. So what sustained silent reading is a long session of reading without vocalizing the words. This improves writing and spelling. This is because the more a child sees a written word, the more they will come to recognize the spelling of that word and correct and well thought out sentence structure. So, we have to present ourselves as reading adults to get children to read themselves. And this was proved in a study published in Clearinghouse, which showed that students with high values of reading, who enjoyed reading for pleasure, were associated with the frequency of interaction with parents in reading activities. So essentially, the more you were involved with your parents in reading, the more you valued reading, and the more you found it pleasurable. And finally, practice makes perfect. Like I said earlier, reading is a skill, and the more you use it, the better you will be at it. So, does reading aloud really teach children to read? The answer is simply yes. Yes, it does. This is because listening comprehension breeds reading comprehension. If you think about it, this makes sense. A child is only ever reading, and this is taken from Jim Treatley's in primary school, words that they already know. So that means it's up to parents and other adults in their lives to present new words outside of school. And one simple way to do this is to read books to children. And this is very important because books present a lot of vocal variety. And the common everyday language is only really made up of about 1,000 words. So if you're just using everyday conversation, you're talking to your child, they're not getting enough words that they need to know to be able to read at a higher level. You need to be reading to your children. So does sustained silent reading really work? Once again, yes, it does. The more one does a task, the better one gets at it. This is because the brain is constantly rewiring itself to be better at skills. So obviously, the more you read, the better you get at it. And the more times a person sees a word in context, the better their understanding and application of the word. This was proven in a study published in the Journal of Developmental Psychology, which studied children and found that they learn words when these words are repeated in subsequent sentences. So isn't teaching the children the job of schools? Well, in some regards, yes, it is. However, 900 hours are spent in school, and 7,800 hours are spent outside of school. So obviously, what you do outside of school is going to have a more meaningful impact than what you do inside school. Knowing this, which do you think will have a more impact, school or their home life? I'm too busy to read to my child. Who here doesn't have a single moment in the day that they spend for themselves? Come on, be honest. Busted. You have time to read to your child, even if that time is only 10 to 20 minutes a day. And besides this, you also need to make sure that you're spending time reading in front of them, because they will mimic your actions. Are real-world examples of this technique? Yeah, there are. One of the most prominent ones is a Boston middle school principal by the name of Thomas P. O'Neill Jr., who started working at the school with the lowest scores in reading. And he established mandatory reading times at the beginning of class where a teacher would read, at the beginning of a school day, where a teacher would read to the child, and mandatory sustained reading times at the end of school in which children were required to read. And what happened was, during a 3-year span, he turned his school from the school with the lowest test scores to the school with the highest test scores in Boston. This was a feat that earned him an article in Time magazine. So, conclusion. Reading helps children learn how to read. Reading in front of a child causes them to want to read. Reading allows a child to better themselves. Reading causes all aspects of a child's language skills to improve. And don't you want your children to be charming, sophisticated, well-spoken people that can move mountains with their thoughts and have informed concepts and ideas? There's no better way to achieve this than to teach them how to read and make them value reading. Thank you.